Greetings, everyone. Today, I'd like to share a fascinating perspective from American writer Jack Milston, who, after marrying a woman from Russia, embarked on his inaugural visit to this country with his family. The primary objective of this journey was to become personally acquainted with his wife's parents and to immerse himself more profoundly in the unique atmosphere of this enigmatic land. Jack Milston has graciously shared his personal reflections, born from several months spent directly in Russia, through his social media channels. I knew beforehand that Moscow was a stern city, one that doesn't easily yield to everyone, but I can now state with absolute certainty that it also isn't overly conducive to unbridled merriment or displays of fervent emotion. If your preference leans toward hearty laughter and relaxed interactions, the vibrant landscapes of Latin America would undoubtedly serve you better. Here, in bustling Moscow, people are not particularly inclined to spontaneous jokes in the midst of crowded streets. Should you desire to experience an explicitly unfriendly glare, simply attempt to stroll down the street, conversing animatedly in English while laughing loudly. An even more severe and disapproving look can likely be effortlessly earned by suddenly speaking in German, particularly if you accompany it with any sort of uncouth sound. Then again, simply uttering a sentence in German might be enough. Muscovites generally project an aura of resolve, focusing intently on their thoughts and typically maintaining a serious demeanor. You can, of course, find similar behavior in other major metropolises, such as New York, but the residents of Moscow exude a peculiar, almost insistent tendency to utterly ignore those around them. Perhaps this is the very reason why municipal workers, diligently maintaining the city's cleanliness, sport bright orange vests to enhance their visibility. Speaking of cleanliness, Moscow's commitment to maintaining pristine conditions is truly remarkable. You won't wait longer than a couple of hours before you'll encounter modern cleaning equipment thoroughly scrubbing the city streets. During this extended sojourn, a rather curious sensation consistently lingered. Just when I began to perceive the populace as uniformly unwelcoming and haughty, someone would unexpectedly execute an act of kindness or genuine consideration, such as holding a door open for me. At that precise moment, I immediately felt a twinge of embarrassment for my hasty judgments. Another element that profoundly surprised me was the seemingly widespread disregard for established rules and personal safety exhibited by Russian individuals. On one of our earliest days in Moscow, my beloved wife, our young son, his doting grandmother, and I chose to take a stroll alongside a picturesque canal. Numerous athletes jogged past us regularly, generously applying perfume, while elderly individuals peacefully reclined on comfortable benches, engrossed in fresh newspapers. Suddenly, my wife drew my attention to an intriguing sight. Look, someone's swimming. And it's directly under the sign that reads "Swimming Strictly Prohibited." An elderly gentleman, clad in swimming trunks entirely unsuitable for the occasion, was calmly swimming in the canal's mucky waters. Waters that local authorities had officially deemed wholly unfit for swimming. Even the ducks swimming by seemed to scatter in a panicked frenzy. This immediately brought to mind the numerous Russian teenagers who frequently scale the tallest buildings for no apparent reason, a true nation with a penchant for completely unwarranted risk. I promptly glanced at my infant son, peacefully slumbering in his stroller, one sock already discarded, exposing his bare little foot to the refreshing Russian air, filled with a diverse array of scents. And my wife and I simply continued our walk. We decided to pause on a pedestrian bridge to admire the expansive vista, while a group of rather peculiar young individuals stood nearby, casting sidelong glances in my direction. As customary in such situations, I diligently avoided smiling and outwardly conveyed that I was not to be trifled with, as much as is possible when pushing a baby stroller. Abruptly, one of these fellows began to approach me rapidly, and I mentally braced myself for a desperate brawl, one against all. The chap came near and mumbled something in Russian with a grim expression. I comprehended nothing of his speech and endeavored to project a threatening countenance. What did he say? I whispered to my wife. Recognizing from my glare that I was primed for decisive combat, she quickly inquired what the young man wanted to communicate. He merely wanted to inform you that your young son has accidentally lost his sock, the lad replied. I awkwardly lowered my gaze to my clenched fists, poised for battle, and experienced a profound sense of shame for my rashness. Please, never smile at people you don't know. This isn't America, where everything is artificially welcoming and friendly, my wise wife advised me on one of the initial days of our joint expedition, while we sauntered through a residential district of Moscow. Prior to this significant moment, I had, out of habit, greeted nearly every passerby with a sincere smile and amicable nod, as befits a well-mannered individual who was raised in the South, where such behavior was always considered a sign of good breeding and basic courtesy. Each of my timid and clearly unauthorized smiles was met with either a degree of suspicion or, worse still, outright menace and a fixed stare, with the exception of those rare instances when I bestowed my smiles upon comely young women. After a handful of similar encounters, I swiftly grasped that smiling at unfamiliar Russian men was likely a surefire way to receive an unexpected punch directly to the face. However, I later realized that this initial reticence was not necessarily a manifestation of rudeness or disrespect, but rather a well-honed defense mechanism. For Russian people, benevolence always has been and remains a highly valued attribute, one they are simply unwilling to squander on questionable strangers. It seems entirely illogical to lavish their disposition and good humor upon every individual they happen to meet. In Russia, strangers are always strangers, and true friends are, above all, friends, my beloved wife simply elucidated. And as soon as you manage to become a true friend of a Russian, you're immediately surrounded by the most heartfelt and responsive people I've ever encountered in my long life. Outwardly, the Moscow suburbs don't diverge too greatly from other major cities around the globe. Broad sidewalks, myriad stores, cozy cafes, modern trams, joyful families with small children, elderly individuals seated on comfortable benches and eagerly discussing their important affairs. All of this is fairly typical of any large city. However, I was most struck by the incredibly abundance of parks and green spaces. It's impossible to traverse even 100 meters without inadvertently stumbling upon a shady square or a modern children's playground. And those comfortable benches. I had never before seen a place where people so deeply enjoy simply sitting, attentively observing the happenings around them, and leisurely contemplating their lives. Following my initial, less than successful experience interacting with local residents, a unanimous decision was made to continue our fascinating journey in a more tranquil and peaceful setting at the cozy dacha belonging to my wonderful wife's parents. I spent the first evening at the dacha imbibing delicious homemade tinctures meticulously prepared by my beloved mother-in-law, accompanying them with pickled tomatoes and striving to converse awkwardly in my atrocious Russian with my new and exceptionally welcoming relatives. If there exists a true paradise on earth, the dacha is unquestionably its closest approximation. The only element that slightly dampened this blissful sensation was the midday soup. Russian people, as I was quick to observe, treat their midday soup with the utmost seriousness. During the course of this extended journey, I sampled almost all existing types of soup: fragrant borscht, hearty rasolnik, rich salyanka, refreshing okroshka, thick mushroom soup. Every single day, I knew with absolute certainty that there would be soup for lunch, and I, as a foreigner, simply had to resign myself to it. Moreover, in Russia, dessert is consistently served immediately following the main course. As soon as I stopped struggling to consume what was on my plate, I was promptly offered a slice of sweet pie or tasty cookies, or both at once, invariably accompanied by a cup of hot black tea. Our neighbors are inviting you to a traditional tea party with a real samovar, my attentive mother-in-law informed me one day. While the antique samovar slowly heated up, I was invited into the cozy home, proudly shown a genuine Russian stove dressed in amusing folk costumes and photographed for posterity. Feeling somewhat like a clown in this situation, I opted to simply savor this rare moment of collective amusement, deciding that I was perhaps participating in some sort of ritualistic dance to summon long-awaited rain in the arid Sahara. Then, for some reason, I was led to a steamy banya and invited to thoroughly steam myself and flog myself with a birch branch, but I politely declined this tempting proposition. When the tea was prepared, we all cheerfully gathered around a large table, and it suddenly became clear that, in Russia, the innocuous term tea party actually refers to a top-secret undertaking codenamed Intoxicate the Native American to a semi-conscious state before sunset. First a little tea, and then vodka, copious quantities of vodka. Throughout the evening, in brief intervals between countless toasts, we spoke at length about our families and enthusiastically shared impressions. At one point, I suddenly mused that if a true paradise existed on Earth, it would undoubtedly be Russia, even despite this endless midday soup. One day, we were returning to our Moscow apartment, and we urgently needed to purchase groceries for the entire week. This is precisely why we found ourselves in the location that I personally consider to be the most appalling in modern Russia and, arguably, the most dreadful place in my long life. Having successfully parked the car and entered the sprawling store, I immediately found myself engulfed in an immense throng of individuals who were immersed in their thoughts and completely oblivious to their surroundings. They propelled their carts, occasionally colliding with one another, yet uttered not a single word and didn't even make eye contact. In this faceless chaos, everyone seemed to be participating in some sort of passive-aggressive game, awaiting the moment when someone would crack and exhibit even the slightest aggression. I had inadvertently stumbled into the infamous Achin. A woman of approximately 70 years of age rudely shoved me aside with her heavy cart in order to get closer to the fish counter. And without so much as a rudimentary excuse me, no polite words whatsoever. If someone's cart is obstructing your path, it's simply moved out of the way without a word. Why does everyone behave this way? Simply because no one cares about those around them. It's just a cart. Is someone waiting for you to step aside? Again, no one cares, because I'm standing here, and everyone else can simply wait. And do you know why all these strange individuals behave in such a manner? It's all because the majority of people in Russia simply do not possess firearms. Despite all the numerous debates about guns in America, they paradoxically deter many individuals from such boorish behavior. In Russia, it seems that everyone has developed a strange conviction that they can do whatever they please, and no one will stop them. Russian people are utterly unafraid of being suddenly shot by their fellow citizens. Rather, it seems that they've all entered into a tacit agreement to behave rudely and brazenly toward one another in public spaces. Therefore, no one is particularly concerned about the endless petty insults and humiliations that sooner or later become an inseparable part of the daily life of any Russian who simply decides to pop into the store for a package of their favorite cornflakes. My dear wife believes that many people still retain peculiar habits from the era of scarcity, when there was only one pair of shoes on the store shelf, and you absolutely had to procure it for your child. The only issue is that all these strange individuals are behaving in the exact same manner in a modern store, one where there is absolutely everything one could desire, and in any quantity required. Russian men, it seems to me, are constantly striving to project an image of being severely tough and unyielding, like genuine gangsters. They rarely smile at one another, but I did manage to find my personal method for greeting complete strangers on the street. Initially, I usually nod my head and slightly furrow my brow, as if inviting them to unite for a decisive struggle against some common foe. And it's vitally important to smile no more than 20% of your usual smile. Without baring your teeth, just slightly lift the corners of your lips. Almost always, you'll receive a similar peculiar gesture in response. If not, simply glare at him as if you're ready to kill him on the spot. Surprisingly, this elicits genuine respect. Russian men unquestionably hold the leading positions in the World Championship of firm handshakes. I've traveled extensively around the globe and shaken an immense number of hands. But in Russia, handshakes always have a special significance. Firm and serious, they perfectly convey a combination of qualities, such as you can always rely on me in a difficult moment, and it's best not to mess with me without a good reason. However, they clearly lack genuine nobility. Russian men bear no resemblance to the valiant knights of ancient tales. They propagate the trite phrase, "he hits you because he loves you." Guys, do you really want this to become your primary international motto? Practically all women constantly lament that there are hardly any true men left in Russia. I vividly recall the very moment when I suddenly realized that all the mendacious propaganda I had been so diligently fed in my youth was utter nonsense and deceit. This momentous event transpired during tedious introduction to Russian classes at university in the late 1990s. Prior to this critical moment, I had always thought that all Russian women were masculine swimmers from East Germany, effortlessly lifting heavy shot puts and easily shattering glass bottles against their heads. Needless to say, this wild stereotype turned out to be complete fabrication, and to my great delight, it bore no relation to harsh reality. Our young teaching assistant was a very fragile and sweet Russian girl, who quite often wore semi-transparent sundresses with a minimal amount of underwear during the summer. If you happened to be on the western side of the auditorium, directly opposite the large window, you could occasionally catch a glimpse of her almost nude figure in the morning sunlight. After that, I endeavored not to miss a single class, and the first forever ceased believing in absurd rumors about women from other countries, including the ludicrous assertion that Russian girls are the most beautiful in the world. Although, to be honest, it's actually the pure truth. I married one myself, after all. But frankly speaking, I believe that the number of beautiful women in Russia relative to the total population is markedly exaggerated. They're encountered here about as frequently as in any other country worldwide. However, the top 5% of gorgeous Russian women truly appear far more attractive than the top 5% in most other countries. I distinctly realized this when I first visited Moscow, and I couldn't help but notice that all these beautiful girls seem to have a rather high opinion of themselves. What I admire most about Russian girls is that they aren't at all shy about literally devouring you with their fixed stare. You can be happily married, constantly twirling your wedding band on your finger, or pushing a baby stroller, but she still desperately attempts to embarrass you, sizing you up from head to toe as she passes by in her semi-transparent summer sundress. When, for example, I'm asked what America has contributed to the world throughout its history, I reply without hesitation, rock and roll and the bacon cheeseburger. The latter can, incidentally, be easily found in Moscow. I personally verified it. And sometimes they're simply magnificent in taste. But of course, I endeavored to sample as many traditional Russian dishes as possible. Mostly I stumbled upon food that was healthful, tasty, and very interesting, though there were also extremely strange options. I even compiled a small list for myself. My favorite dishes: everything that grew at my beloved mother-in-law's dacha, especially the delicate white raspberries, which I had never even seen before, the wholesome borjomi and delicious tarkin, though they aren't entirely Russian, homemade pelmeni, absolutely everything related to pickled cucumbers, sweet cranberries, and sugar. This is my main weakness. Healthy churchkala Russian ice cream and, of course, diverse soups. Okroshka, very unexpected. Delicious solyanka and hearty rasolnik. My least favorite dishes: hematogen herring under a fur coat, glutamate in almost all dishes, tea instead of coffee in the mornings, and, of course, herring. I tried it a full 3 times because God loves a trinity, and Russian people are very skilled at persuading. All 3 times it was an absolute abomination. What is it anyway? Some sort of oversalted fish, lavishly coated in slime. In conclusion, I would like to say that I will definitely return to Russia because this unique place truly captivated me. My caring family and numerous new Russian friends who are so sincere and open in their interactions have made Russia a genuinely unique place on earth for me. Never before have I felt so welcome in such a strange place, one where I had never been before.